Hey guys. So William Butler Yeats was born in 1865 and he died in 1939. Let's just all pause and say his last name together. Ready? I'll say it, then you say it back. Yeats.
Yeats.
All right, not Yeats. Got it? All right, so now you're gonna be smart for the rest of your life and look really smart when you talk about him. So William Butler Yeats was born in Dublin, and this is really important because Irish nationalism and being Irish is a major part of his work, and we'll see that especially in Easter 1916. But at any rate, he was born in Dublin, and he was especially close with his father, who was a lawyer who became an artist. And this switch in his father's life from being something very practical in career to something a little less impractical, this really influenced Yeats, who himself became an artist, became a writer. Something else about his father that influenced Yeats is that his father wasn't religious. Yeats searched for a long time for his own sense of religion, his own sense of spirituality, and eventually he found it in poetry. He felt that that was his religion, that was his faith, his spirituality was in writing and poetry. He believed that poetry should be elusive, it should be ethereal, it should be mystical, it should be not necessarily easy to read at all, but deep and magical in some ways. And I think you'll find that that is true of both of the poems that we read, that they're interesting and not necessarily straightforward. So he's devoted to Irish nationalism, which I mentioned already. And that plays a role in his life in a couple of ways. In 1889, he met a woman named Maud Gonne, who was herself an Irish revolutionary. She was, this powerful and dynamic and beautiful woman who was devoted to Irish nationalism as well. And he fell madly in love with her, and he courted her for 13 years, unsuccessfully. But you have to be impressed with that sort of persistence, And also, another reason that Irish nationalism sort of played a role in his art, in 1891, 1892, he was a founding member of the Irish Literary Society. And through that, he met a woman named Lady Gregory. And Lady Gregory was a wealthy Irish woman who wanted to patronize the arts, wanted to support Irish writing and Irish nationalism in art. And so she became Yeats's patron for many, many years and supplied him with enough money that he could write and live okay. Eventually, he got over his love for Maud Gonne, married a woman named Georgiana Hyde-Lees in 1917, with whom he had 2 children. And through this time, of course, he was writing. So let me say just a couple things about the 2 poems we're reading. You're going to read The Second Coming, which is a great, great poem. And probably, if you're going to file away in your brain what's important about this poem, the thing you'd want to file away is that it's just one of the most major modern era poems that we'll read. This poem very much has to do with how sort of dark and horrible the world is in the early 1900s. And so you'll catch that just from the tone of it alone and from some of the lines. Do your best to try to interpret it and make sense of it, especially those last few lines that are allusions to the Bible and ideas from the Bible. Even though Yeats, of course, is not religious, he's pulling in that imagery and those ideas because his audience would have been familiar with them. So it's a particularly dark poem, but incredibly well written. So enjoy. And the other poem that you're reading is Easter 1916, which is a poem that he wrote in response to a particularly horrible event that occurred in Dublin. Irish nationalists had taken over, I think it was a post office, I can't remember, but a government building. And they had taken it over as sort of like a plea for Irish freedom. And the English responded by killing a lot of them. There was a sort of a bloodbath on that day. And then afterward, the English murdered many of the Irish revolutionaries, nationalists who had been leaders in the Easter Uprising of 1916. So his poem is a response to that. And if you want to read a little bit more about that, your book talks a bit more about what happened on that particular day. But the poem is somewhat straightforward, maybe a little more straightforward than The Second Coming, and also dark, of course, given its subject matter. But it also has these sort of mystical elements. Pay attention to the line that gets repeated again and again at the end of the stanzas. So finally, the end of Yeats's life, let's just hit on that real quick. In 1922, he became a senator of the Irish Free State. So he sort of saw his dreams for a free Ireland brought to fruition and then became a part of it by becoming a politician. In 1939, he died and was buried in France. And his body remained there for many years, but then eventually he was disinterred and brought back to Ireland so his final resting place could be Ireland. He's widely considered to be one of the most important writers of poetry in English in the 20th century. And then one final thing I'll say about him just has to do with his philosophy that you'll see show up a little bit in The Second Coming. And that is that Yeats had this belief in something that he called spiritus mundi, and translates to spirit of the world. And it's this idea for him, this very strong belief that he had that it's kind of something like this. It's like a great collective unconsciousness, where like all of our thoughts and feelings just go together. So all human thoughts and feelings sort of get stored in this spirit of the world. And whether we're all thinking happy thoughts or sad thoughts shifts how the world shifts. You'll notice a little bit of that. We'll reference to that in The Second Coming. So enjoy Yeats. He's great. Yeats is great. Enjoy. It's Yeats, not Yeats. Cool? Yeats rhymes with Gates. I love me some Yeats.